Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's professional learning session in the Spirit of Laudato Si, forming ecological leaders in schools. It is afternoon because it's still just light here, but it's about to get dark, so then it becomes evening. Before we get started properly, some housekeeping. As you'll see, it's being recorded and the video will be made available to Australian Catholics Education Hub members in a week or so. If anyone has any concerns, please feel free to contact us. For those of you who have registered for professional development, attendances for accreditation will be taken. To make it easier, can you please make sure that your full name is on your Zoom link first and last? If you haven't provided us with your VIT number, you can message Michael McVeigh or myself on the chat or send us an email and I'll put the email addresses in the chat. And as we go through, as the discussion goes on, please feel free to put any questions and comments into the chat. I'm expecting quite a lively participation from you all. So we'll start with acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various places from which we gather together today, who have walked upon and cared for this land for thousands of years. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We also pay our respects to First Nations people attending today's session. We acknowledge the continued deep spiritual attachment and relationship of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to this country and commit ourselves to the ongoing journey of reconciliation. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And welcoming prayer, and for those of you who do this quite often, you're probably bored with my prayer, so I've got a new one. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Most blessed Holy Trinity, Creator, Saviour, and Spirit, through your word of life, all was and is created, all was redeemed and is called to redemption. All was united in your bosom of love and is called to live in communion. Because of you, dear Trinity, all of creation is a constant exercise of listening to your word, so that we can embody the word in our own lives. Teach us, therefore, how to truly listen to your creating and creative word. Remind us that your word is present and can be heard in each living being. May we listen and learn from your message present throughout nature. Open our ears and our hearts and teach us strength and courage, so that we may hear the pain and suffering of our sister Mother Earth and of those most affected by the socio-environmental crisis. In the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Again, thank you for your attendance. I'm about to hand over to Laura Kings, Australian Catholic's Assistant Editor, Education and Youth, who will introduce today's guest speakers, Sue Martin and Alice Carwardine. Laura is an experienced teacher with a background in English, media studies, and religious education, as well as being a journalist. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks so much, Michelle. I'm really excited about the two guests we have here today and the subject that we're talking about. So Alice and Sue are good friends of Australian Catholics, so it's quite a nice session for us to run this afternoon. It's like being amongst old friends, and a great topic to talk about too, and one that we get really enthusiastic about. Sue Martin is a passionate educator, and excuse me for looking to the side because I forgot to print off the bios, is a passionate education and engagement manager, delivering ecological and spiritual solutions that connect people to place, currently working as an ecology officer at Australian Jesuits. She's experienced across government, schools, and NRM. What does that stand for, Sue?
Like natural resource management. That's a jargon. That's jargon.
That's great. Yes, I'll remember that. And she lives by the Jesuit motto, faith doing justice. She leads locally as a chair of the Cat Hills Environment Network and is vice president of the New South Wales Environmental Education Association. And we're also joined by Alice Carwardine. Alice works in the mission and formation team for Edmund Rice Christian Brothers Oceania province. I used to teach in an Edmund Rice school before I had my children. She previously worked as the Catholic Earthcare Coordinator of Caritas Australia She enjoys spending time running professional development and retreats for staff. So you're very comfortable in this space, aren't you? And as well as workshops and retreats for students on topics of Laudato Si and integral ecology. What we didn't put on the website was that Alice also writes for Madonna magazine periodically and Australian Catholics and helps us out with various things. So it's really lovely to have you both here today. We're talking about forming ecological leaders in schools, and one of those lovely terms that's really grown. I remember when I was first teaching, we talk about stewardship and we talk about creation, but now we have this lovely term, Laudato Si, and it brings so much more with it, you know. And Pope Francis has given us a great gift in giving us a framework to talk about these things that's quite useful for our modern life. So I'm going to start off with a couple of general questions today. I might start with you, Sue, if that's okay. And I'm just going to ask you, what does ecological leadership look like in a Catholic school context?
Yes, so thanks, Laura. And you could do a degree in this. So apologies if I shorten it. And reflecting on that question, I wanted to pick up that it is Catholic social teaching of See Judge Act. It is having what I call a culture of caring for creation embedded in the school. So the leadership has it that it's just core business to be thinking about how to care for Earth. But the main thing that I maybe wanted to share is that it is the triple bottom line of having a decision-making framework that instead of just thinking about, well, how much will this cost or how will this affect my students or my the school community, add in that triple or even quadruple, let's keep going back just for this. How will these things that our school is doing or I'm teaching or I'm wanting to bring into the school community, how will that affect the local waterway, the catchment, the country that that we're walking on? So for me, it's about it's a thinking, it's a worldview. Leadership looks like that everybody has that decision making. Um, yes. So there's lots more, but I'll leave it at that, Laura.
That was fantastic. I must admit I had to make some sneaky notes then. Every time I'm looking for some simple way to express things, and you just did such a great job. Thanks, Sue. And now that I've put that pressure on, Alice, is there anything you'd like to add about, what ecological leadership looks like in a Catholic school to you?
Yeah, I mean, ditto to what Sue said, but I think sort of as I was really thinking about this in just in preparation, there's that cultural change is always so hard, right? Like that's always the hardest part to get. But I was thinking, what does that really look like? What does that mean? And there was one school that I worked with a little while ago who really got it, I felt, in a very short time. And there was five things which I'll name really quickly. And the uh, the the evidence that we could see that this school was doing some really great stuff was the students were able to turn around and they were saying that's not very Laudato Si to the staff, right? Like they were the ones that were changing their behavior, their language, all of these wonderful things as well. So the school had, firstly, a real commitment. They dedicated 12 months to Laudato Si. They had a whole year of it. They created a really positive theme around it. So it was everything was positive. Everything was all it was like, this is a good stuff that we're doing. They focused on behavior change. So routines, this is a primary school, processes, all of those sorts of things, and then tying that in with all of their decision making around purchasing, et cetera, et cetera. They did that in dialogue between staff and students. So they had a staff committee, but they had students who were sort of part of that conversation as well. And that committee gave them longevity. So that committee is still formed within the school now. It has the principal on it, has the business manager, has the APRE, like it has all the kind of the right people that you want as leaders to be part of it. And they've taken their 12 months and they're, into year 2, year 3 of very similar progress. So, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So I like that sort of idea of developing a measurable framework too and saying, well, here's 5 things that we can identify so that you can then track them into the future to make sure that these things survive and also the idea of the committee. So how can Laudato Si guide the way we shape student leaders today? Tying these 2 very strong parts of school life together. Sue, would you like to comment?
So Laudato Si came out in 2015. So it is a relatively new document. And it is the Pope Francis's call to the whole world, not just Catholics, but the whole world to go out and care for our common home. But the thing about the journey to become a Laudato Si school, Laudato Si community, is that we've been given the 7 goals. And so I really feel that those 7 goals can guide students when they take on what do we want our school to look like, or how can we make those cultural changes that Alice mentioned. So for me, Laudato Si is a beautiful document that guides. And it is also written as the See Judge Act, the Catholic social teaching of having students really think about it, do some discerning, judge what they want to take on, and then go out and make their worlds a better place. So give that active hope. So I really do love it as a guiding document.
Can you see any links to leadership qualities in schools at all, Alice?
Sue, did you want to jump in real quick? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who reads Laudato Si and has some sort of transformation as from that, which a lot of people have in many ways, automatically become leaders in some respect. And I think it's just that it's the values that you get from engaging with the document. I do think though, Laudate Deum, which of course is the sequel, right? That we sort of pair them together now as the two. It reminds us that, it talks a lot about advocacy and a lot of things that are happening at very high level UN spaces, but then it reminds us, do not forget the small things, and that's the behavior. And I think for that student and staff relationship within schools, there are students who can be teaching teachers through their behavior and their words and their actions and all that sort of stuff on what that looks like, and then the teachers can be doing the same. So yeah, it's just living it. It is the guide, but then you've got to transform it into lived word. Yeah,
because that's a little bit your experience, isn't it? You had an ecological conversion and became a leader in your school. That's what started you on this path. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. In 2018, my conversion came in the form of a zero waste Lent challenge that I set for myself, which was really difficult, and I wouldn't recommend doing it that way, but it was worth it for me at the time, and it was really transformational. But it was a whole person conversion that happened at the time. It was my soul, it was my faith, it was my practices, my everything changed and has really stuck with me over time to do that. So but that I would never have had that if I didn't have Laudato Si and also people around me. Like I think at the time, Sue and I were probably in contact in some way, but having that community around me as well during that time was really important. So, yeah.
And at the time, did it bleed into the people around you?
Yeah, I think particularly my parents, strangely, that was I was really challenging their behaviors. Because this was in 2018, we didn't even have the plastic bag ban at the time, and those little things hadn't come into effect yet, and that was really challenging for them to be like, oh, actually, we should be or could be doing more. But yeah, working at a school, engaging with students, the students would often question, why are you doing that? Like, because some of the behaviors that I was doing were quite strange. And yeah, it did. I wouldn't say necessarily all of them came away completely transformed as I did, but little things they were challenged by and yeah, has impacted them.
Sorry for putting you on the spot there, but
It's okay.
I was just trying to bring out that idea that we build the leadership in the students, but it often comes from the teachers as well. So, and often through just example and modelling, isn't it, in our behaviours. So they teach us, we teach them, and it's the beauty of the job, isn't it? So I'm going to throw a couple of questions out now. So you both come from different backgrounds. So I'm just going to concentrate on you for a second. How has your journey shaped your understanding of ecological conversion and leadership?
So I'll just share. I was educated by the Good Samaritans and came from a family that had faith doing justice. So justice was there. And I feel as if my student life, I was given the opportunity by those feisty nuns who are so beautiful and are still being the feisty nuns today, to be a student leader that cared for the environment in my schooling. So that conversion had started, but it was around justice, and this was back in the 80s. So the word environment hadn't really been around. But for me, I had a real passion that trees should come back, and I still have that passion. So right from there, that conversion to care for earth was there, and I did go into NRM. I did go into caring for rivers, caring for catchments, but the heart was missing, that the heart bit. And I also did teach. I taught at John Paul II, the senior high in Western Sydney. I taught agriculture. So I do have a love of sharing this journey to care for Earth. And so for me, that seed that the feisty nuns sowed and my parents sowed has blossomed, and it's still a journey. It's still a journey of conversion for it to be head, heart, and hands. But to me, the heart is actually really crucial in the journey, and I have loved forming myself in Ignatian spirituality, where God is in all. And so for me, where is the all? And the all is in the other. So in working with Alice, it is in the land, working, caring for the platypus, where I live in Western Sydney. And it is God forming in my parish, sitting in, in community and with Eucharist. So for me, the conversion, I can't name it because it happened such a long time ago, but it's still an ongoing thing. So I'll leave it at that.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, because I was thinking just before I jumped on with you guys about my own experience at school. We didn't have Laudato Si, we had Garden Club. and Garden Club was very much about the school environs, And but when you think about it, it's very much the same thing. And I do think that this more modern idea of bringing some heart into it is just so powerful. Alice, you've got some more recent experience. So, would you like to tell us about? I know you've talked about your ecological conversion a bit, but would you like to talk a little bit about how your journey's shaped your understanding?
Yeah, I think my the faith part of my journey really is a cosmological one. Because I was big, I love physics at school. That's why I taught it as a teacher. And I didn't know at the time when I was a student that cosmology was sort of where my faith was going. And yeah, that was only, when I got to uni and doing my masters, and I was starting to read people like Thomas Berry and Brian Swim and Ilia Delio and Elizabeth Johnson. I was like, oh, people actually are thinking the same as me. They're articulating what I thought about God in a way that I was resonating with me. And yeah, that heart bit, that was also part of it, but just not the practical part of it as well. So yeah, I'm forever grateful for that. So
We did a edition. You had an article in it, Alice, about the relationship between science and religion last year.
yeah,
It was amazing
yeah,
how often that came up in articles
yeah.
from different people, and that the whole edition went in a different direction than we thought it would, which was a very good
Oh,
thing.
yeah,
A great
yeah.
edition. Really enjoyed it. So I'll just return to you. What role does spiritual formation play in developing ecological leaders? Um, and we've touched on this a bit, but how's it different from just teaching environmental science or sustainability or just putting a recycling bin out at
Yeah,
lunchtime?
so it's a really good question, and it is something that I think needs more exploring. And I talk about we have an environmental conversion, and we go out and we want to, chain ourselves to trees because we don't want that tree to go, or so we really know the world needs help, and that's a conversion to care for Earth. But when you love Earth and you're in communion with Earth and you are interconnected, so everything is integral, and you have the need to reconcile with Earth, and so lament the world, the cry of the earth, cry of the poor. It's an ecological conversion. So you could name it something else, but there is the deeper interconnected love of a place or being in communion with earth. That means that the spiritual journey is important as well, as just the head journey, the intellectual journey, which is very important, but you do need head, heart, and hands again. But for me, there is one academic in India who's tried to measure an ecological conversion, and I think that would be so interesting for us as educators to actually understand what does this look like when we're trying to have ecological conversion. And Suganthi, who came to me through an Edmund, through a Christian brother, and the name's gonna, I'm thinking Kevin Donnelly, but I've probably got it wrong, Alice. But anyway, a
Kevin
beautiful,
McDonald.
yeah, I was close. About place and conversion and love of place. Suganthi tries to, how much caring do we do? How much dwelling do we do? How much inspired are we by the cosmos? Yeah. So Laura, I do think it's an exciting place, and it's not been unpacked to its fullest. So there's a challenge for some students out there.
Oh, absolutely. Did you have something you wanted to add, Alice?
Yeah, because I feel that the spiritual formation, like that's my job now, which is a real privilege, and it's been very exciting to explore what that's looking like and where we can go and all those sorts of things. And yeah, that the formation is key. It's in that head, heart, and hands that we try to bring together in those processes. You know, we want to bring people to um be able to see God in all things. You know, that's part of that. That's the cosmological sort of side of it, I guess. But the we can do that too through the hands part. Like bush care is something which is something that Sue really encouraged me to do, and I love doing it now. And it's something that we try to incorporate in some form as part of formation, as well. Because, like for me, the places where I do bush care, if someone came along now and started spraying, you know, herbicides or something like that, or pesticides in that space, we get, like, our team gets quite frustrated. We get really angry. We're like, how dare you? You know, we've been caring for this so well. But yeah, for us, that's the lament. You know, we have that really deep connection, and if people can get a touch of that in some sort of program, that's part of a spiritual formation, and then and also have that the prayerful, even the practices available to them to explore. Yeah, it becomes quite transformational. So yeah.
It is just anecdotally, I notice when we bring the young writers in to work with us, it's something that you see in Laudato Si and also in Catholic social teaching, and I know they're so closely related, is that they don't always make that connection. So they know that the doing a good work is the right thing, and they're really enthusiastic about doing the good work, and they're really interested, but they don't always know why. And so, yeah, it's a really fascinating process when you're working with them as writers to try and bring that out. You know, why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? Make that connection back. How do you respond to students or staff who feel overwhelmed by the climate crisis? I've actually seen you looking a bit overwhelmed, Alice. How do you help them move from despair to sort of hope-filled action? Do you have any advice, Sue?
Sorry about that. So it's interesting. I do look after a ministry called Being with God in Nature, and it's the spiritual exercises in nature. So looking after our spiritual lives through connecting with nature. And it's really interesting. Melbourne University was doing some eco-anxiety work and came to look at the traditional practices that are around, and they really looked at how meditation and Aboriginal walking the land, and for us, our spiritual conversation in unpacking how we were having a spiritual connection in nature. So eco-anxiety, or that being overwhelmed, I do feel it is going to be something that's part of a teacher's practice, and understanding that the world is changing. We're not going to change that the world is changing, but the world is still there to be loved, and creation and its awe and amazing way in which we can live and live using, like living Laudato Si. We will have we will be able to have community and right, and change will happen, and hopefully we will be resilient, and maybe our parishes as oases might be the way to explore that. So yes, I don't have, I mean, I do love creation, and I love community, and I have like my faith gives me a way forward. But yeah, I do think we're going to have to support others in that acceptance, connect, like that the real depression and fight, flight, fright responses. Yeah, so it is something to be that is always there.
Do you think this sort of getting involved and doing something in the school might be
Yeah,
helpful
your
in that
hands.
process?
Yes, get your hands, get busy, get m- ma change, make the change you want to see in the world. Like be the change. Um, starts, act local for the global. And I do also really believe student voice can change truth to power. And I have done a lot of work with Al Gore in his truth. And I suppose I there are good leaders out there. Not, you know, I don't know what the Holy Spirit is doing with the leaders at the moment, maybe. And now I'll stop.
No, it's an interesting point because I know when you were talking to our interns a couple of weeks ago, or a month or so ago, Alice, you were sort of talking about almost like, oh, I just want to do so much and I can't get to it all. Does being involved help that feeling at all?
Yeah, and I've been, I suppose, over time quite open about my own mental health and eco-anxiety and all of those because I do feel that a lot, but in various ways and different places and stuff. But yeah, the community helps, having people around you that are also on that journey is helpful, and the action side of it is helpful. Like, after I've done bush care, I'm feeling way better about the world. Even just because I've spent time in nature, like all of those sorts of things. The work by Joanna Macy has often, like, is something I go back to a lot, and how she sort of talks about this space and time that we are in. So for those that haven't had a chance to explore her work, I'll allow you to do it because it's really is a process of going through her things. But there's other languages coming out now around, revolutionaries and almost this kind of like wartime sort of word, like we're in, like, I mean, we are experiencing wars. There's lots of wars happening, we know that, but there's also that the bigger climate conflict that's happening all over the place. And yeah, it's just really interesting that some people are starting to explore, if we think back to other crises like World War I and World War II, what was going through people's minds then? What were they thinking and how were they dealing with the grief and loss and the challenges, even though it was for shorter periods of time as opposed to something that's longer and going for a longer time. But I think there's some inspiration we can draw from there. And I also take comfort that there are lots of really, really bright, talented psychologists and psychiatrists who are working really hard at this to be able to, find strategies and find things that are going to work for us. And I think we need that for our young people. Like the teachers need that as well for young people. Like even, growth mindset, which was a thing that came out, a few years ago. It was everyone was using growth mindset and all those sorts of things. And they'll hopefully, I have a hope that in the next 10 or so years we'll see something like that will help us in this space, but just not sure what that looks like yet. So yeah, but that's my hope.
Yeah. It's an interesting point. I just put a link in the chat box to an article that in one of our sister publications about she's a GP who writes medical stories for Eureka Street about how she's seeing young people coming in who are quite anxious. And so schools do have a role to play, don't they, in helping students manage that anxiety and giving them an outlet for feeling like they can control something in their future. So it's a hard question, isn't it? And so So when we're doing this, how can schools build and sustain a culture of concern for creation? Not just isolated events like, oh, okay, it's Earth Day or something like that, but as part of their daily life and identity. Sue, do you have any ideas on that?
Well, I have actually done a little bit of work around what are the 10 tips for a school to be an environmental organization, and I do think it is embedding culture that cares for creation, which I've said before, but I, I do look at how corporate journeys for sustainability to be embedded. So I do think it's being having and I'll share with Laura my 10 tips, but they're very they're very simple tips. But I do feel that the key one is the message from the top. So if the message from the top is saying that this is important, then that will trickle down. And no matter how passionate a teacher is in this space, if that passionate teacher will do amazing things, but if they've got the message from the top, it's so much easier. It's so much easier. So for me, I love that our Jesuits have said we will, the universal apostolic preference is to care for our common home. I think our Catholic schools can say Pope Francis said you all have to go out there and kick goals out of Laudato Deum, but I'm not sure our leaders are saying those messages. So there is a little bit of work to be done at a diocesan level. Yeah, so that for me, that's sustaining it and not just being the yes, we'll plant trees on tree day. It does have to be something owned by the school.
Absolutely. Did you have anything that you wanted to add, Alice?
Yeah, I know Sue and I have had many conversations like about this, but the way I always picture it in my brain is a bit like a hamburger. Like you need that top thing with the trickle down. And as Sue said before as well, those student voices amplifying. And if you can get that happening, you've got some real ground there. As I was sort of saying before about the behavior and the culture and stuff, that's all important too. But I think the two, I guess, or another two tools or some, really, really useful things that you have at your disposal that you can tap into are your charism, if you have one, and also curriculum. Because curriculum, ACARA is now changing slightly, slowly over time. It's developing, it's getting there, and then the RE curriculums are following suit as well. But there are two other things that you can be like. Even the Edmund Rice charisms, there are there's bits that we can tap into, even though it was written a long time ago, being recontextualized now. There's things that we can be using. So that helps that identity part as well. Is taking those things. So yeah.
I think that's the great gift of the word integral, isn't it? Because as soon as we started talking about caring for it's our common home, we're looking, at looking after the poor, then you can straight away make some really strong, even if you're teaching, Josephite or, those connections are still there. So it's a really marvelous document that way, isn't it? Laudato Si. How can the religious education classroom, I know you just mentioned this, Alice, but become a space where students encounter Laudato Si and connect it to their faith values and decisions? So, how do we work that into our day-to-day teaching?
Yeah, I mean, I actually can't really speak too much to this experience because I've only ever taught senior religion and not junior. But I have taught with a lot of colleagues who have and all those sorts of things. But I think the second that you can take it outside, where you can go out into nature, or what we term as nature, and then be out, and witnessing God's creative action and love outside. I think that's when, to me, that's where I see there's some real power there. So yeah.
I thought with this lovely lady, I'm just trying to think of her name. I think it was Eva Banathy, but I'm not sure, who did a marvelous job before Laudato Si came out at tying it all together in a framework and inserting it into the curriculum when I was at Terrace. And so it's there. You just have to find the other language, like creation or stewardship, or and sort of and hook it in. You can do it even in quite a knowledge focused sort of curriculum. Just takes a bit of creativity, doesn't it? Sue, did you have anything that you could share about?
Probably not, because I haven't been in a classroom. But there are there's so many tools. Like one of our integral ecology fellowship created the universe cards, and just the universe story, bringing that in, to the class. And I sort of also feel that create like um, uh, caring. Like for me, it's platypus. But what is it that the class is going to go out? It could be a tree in the playground. It could be a bird that comes. So I do think it is having the building, the connection with the seasons, and so prayer can sort of connect back into that country.
Yeah.
So that maybe is my only tip.
Margie Abbott's book, and probably more specifically Jen Callanan's book, Sparks of the Universe and Cosmic Sparks, which were actually meant to be one book together, but they had different audiences, so they wrote them differently. But Jen's one's written for like rituals to prayer experiences that you can be doing in class. So yeah, highly recommend that one.
Well, yeah, that's a good connection too to the formation activities outside the classroom as well. And don't worry, guys, I've got some stuff for you, because I just plugged Eva Banathy, but yeah, she taught me well when I was younger, and now that's all sitting in the everything I learnt from her. I think she used to use March of the Penguins as one of her class texts in one of the bigger boys' classrooms, but it's all sitting in our teachers' notes on Australian Catholic. So I had a good teacher, but I have to credit her with leading me that way. But can you share an example of a transformative moment you've witnessed in a student or school community when they're engaging with Laudato Si? Sue, I'll call on you first.
Yeah, sorry. I might share. I've done quite a bit of helping schools with staff spirituality days, and that I love that. Like I love helping unpacking and staff spirituality days. And one thing I often ask is to just um, how are you going as a school? What's the spectrum? Is it like there's just one person and nobody else, or is it, that the what are the calls for care? And for me, that just is a really nice place to say, well, the journey's got to just keep going. And but I just wanted to share, I did do a spirituality day with a school in South Australia. And when I asked that question, and I do actually ask them to physically move. So there is a bit of peer, there could be a bit of peer thing, but there's no right or wrong answer. It's to how are you thinking your school is going on this journey? And this school in South Australia all moved to the point, like at this end of the spectrum. And I've never seen that in a school. And so that still gives me hope of well, this is the journey we're helping schools all on. Um, and for you to physically see every teacher and admin and the whole school identify that they supported the Laudato Si journey at the school was amazing. It was transformational. And then, so then the staff all know that even though they'll have different ways of doing it and they have different areas, some was energy, some were waste, some were just interested, some came, it didn't matter. They all knew that they all were on this journey and at this part of the spectrum. So that was just beautiful. It was so beautiful.
And
So
it can happen.
I'll finish
It can
sharing now.
happen. Yeah. How about you, Alice?
I've had the privilege, I guess, of hearing lots of these stories with the Catholic Earthcare School networks that we were helping last year and the year before and all that sort of stuff. And there's always so many, examples of this. But one that I saw that I has really stuck with me, and I've stolen for my own use, was it was actually at a mercy conference at a school. It was a group of staff, but the students were the ones who were doing the prayer, and they started with, and I'm probably not meant to have stolen this because it's probably not good in terms of like canon law. It's probably a bit against the whole thing. But they started with Creator God, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit, right? That was the start of the prayer. And I think part of it was because it was like it's a mercy charism. It was an all-girls school, and there's a little bit of changing the language there to be less masculine and non-gendered in any way. So that's why you get Creator God, Jesus Christ, not the Son, and Holy Spirit, right? But the bit that sat with me was the Creator God bit. I was like, that's the word I was looking for. I need that. The Creator God, Jesus Christ, who is also so important to us, and the Holy Spirit, of course, which is with us always. So it was just that getting into the liturgy part as well that really, really struck with me. And everyone got it. Like everyone who was in that audience, male or female, it didn't matter. They just were like, yeah, that's where we need to be at this point in time. So yeah, I don't know. I use it all the time. I'm not sure I'm probably meant to in terms of the laws of the church, but whatever. I'm going to keep doing it.
It's funny that you mentioned that because my children are in my son is in a diocesan primary school up here in Brisbane, and I'm pretty sure for their welcome to country, they do create a God at the start of their assembly. So that's quite nice too, because that connects a whole lot of things, in the language. I'm going to just change up the order of my questions a little bit, partly because we're running out of time and partly because of flow. But you mentioned Catholic Earthcare then, Alice. What strategies have you found most effective for building staff capacity around Laudato Si with your work there?
So a lot of things that have already been mentioned. The goals, focusing on the goals, the 7 Laudato Si goals is very helpful. I think also there's a lot of logistical things like even when you've got a committee of teachers that are working together, or having someone who's employed that gets release time to be able to do this stuff. Oh, that would just be the dream. Yeah, peak high standard, all that sort of stuff. That support really, there's so many sustainability coordinators that I've spoken to. They're like, I'm the coordinator, but I don't have any release time and I don't have a budget is the other thing as well, which is not always necessary, but it does help. It just relieves that pressure of being like, okay, if we want to do all these things, who's going to fund it? The formation is really important. So when the whole staff is formed as much as possible, that is useful, and formation not just as professional development but actual spiritual formation as well, and networking too, is being part of a network, whether that's a leader in the school or the teacher that's able to do that resource sharing and collaboration.
That's actually a really good point. Yeah. Sue, I'm just going to jump back to you. because you've got some experience in local ecological networks and you've mentioned it a few times. What are some of the most effective ways schools can connect young people to place and local action?
Can I just answer a little question? And it's
Sure.
my soapbox. So apologies, Laura. Um, I often go into a school and say, I don't think the passionate person running the environment journey at a school should start with rubbish. So that's a really good conversation to have because I just want to share, I think every school principal says, if only we didn't have litter. If only we didn't have litter, and will you solve it? And for me, that is a burnout happening in the next year or and to be known as the rubbish lady, well, me, I'm talking about me, is not actually loving creation and having connection and relationship. So don't get me wrong, waste is important, but if you have a culture of waste, you won't have litter, but you don't start with litter. So there you go, Laura, I'm off my soapbox now.
I actually
Get
love
off my
that.
soapbox.
I actually love that. We've got a writer who writes for us called Michelle Girk, who's written a couple of really good articles about, other ways that you
Yeah,
can look at these
yeah,
things, fish ladders, children's
yeah,
books,
yeah.
and yeah, I agree with that too, because I
So
think everything,
it is the
yeah,
principle that says, oh, litter, it's the problem. But actually, um, our spiritual journey is to love creation, not to be, not to. Anyway, I'm off the soapbox. I'll stop there.
no, I
Now,
think it's a
your
good
question,
soapbox. Yeah,
your question
yeah.
was around schools, and I do a lot of understanding that risk has become something that all schools have to manage, and there's quite a bit of work around nature play and the role of just being teaching outside, like the Take Me Outside Day, and a few things like that. And there are that like it is hard because teachers fear like the risk and fear how can they control outside and management. Um, but I really do think finding a way to connect with a bush care group or connect with a land care group or connect with species that can be your species will sort of bridge that fear, risk, and if a student, and often it's the students that inside are hard to manage when they're outside and they're actually learning in a different way, they become the leaders that you would not have imagined. So, but you can't say, oh, just go outside and everything will be rosy. But yes, so for me, I've just undertaken a school's wetland challenge in the Hawkesbury, and it was asking school to take on one piece of waterway and come to a day and say what have they done to ensure that waterway was cared for. And it was so good, and it was our local Catholic school came to the local environment centre, and an environment person took them on a walk to a hanging swamp, and that became the start of this wetland challenge. But it could be small, like it could be, really small. So I do know it's not about adding to the school load, but there are ways. I think I really do feel there are ways to slowly get out and overcome risk, overcome fear, overcome all of those things. And the garden club might be the best one.
Absolutely. Or bring a bag of leaves into the classroom. I've done that before. I'm going to do it to my colleagues so you can hear me at our formation day. Look, did anyone have anything they wanted to add and leave the people who've come along to hear from you today before we wrap things up?
No, I finished my soapbox, so that's okay, Laura.
So good. Much as duty can be such a fun time when you're connecting with the kids, but asking kids to pick up the litter is often a site of conflict. So, yeah, I think that's a really good point to make. And also your point, Alice, about networking. I think that's a really good one. Find your supporting people. We often do it for curriculum, they're fantastic. I'll just let everyone know I have done some supporting notes, but I'll make sure that I connect with Alice and Sue before they go out. They're always sitting under the recordings of the videos on our website as well. But I've made you some notes to support this session that connects with the resources that we share as well. I'll just quickly share my screen so you can have a look at those. So what I've done is I've tried to show you I've just done a little overview about the Catholic response to environmental challenges. I actually pulled that out of one of Michael McVeigh's articles that I'll talk about in a minute. And then I've just sort of listed some of the resources that we offer that will explain what Laudato Si is, how it connects to theology. I've done the same with Catholic leadership. And then underneath, I've put in some of our resources and so that you can talk about, okay, what does the Catholic Church say about this? What does the Catholic Church say about leadership? But then there's a connection between the two, and I think that's where we're really talking today. It's at a teacher level, it's at a school level. It's a bit like approaching bullying. You have to do it at every angle. Um, and um, um, and so how do we do that? So hopefully there's some things that you can use inside and outside the classroom to help there. And there's a wonderful article here about it was Sophia, there you go, Sue, about a young girl who started a campaign to ban plastic bags, and it started in a school and where that's headed. So much so that when I mentioned that article, Sue knew who I was talking about, not just what I was talking about, but who I was talking about. I've also tried to make those explicit links for you with social justice, with Catholic social teaching, and because I think that whole idea that it leads into when we're talking about classroom, we're talking about refugees as well. We're talking about massive climate events. How do we care for people after floods? It's all linked. It's all linked in our curriculum, and you can find it there. So I've just tried to show you a lot of articles here are written by our young writers. They're always really interested. So I think you will find engagement in the classroom. It might be different to, say, 15, 20 years ago, where the kids were just attacking us about whether climate change was real. I don't think that's a battle you'll be facing anymore. We have these wonderful things here called AC Plus resource guides. And the thing is, we do have one on caring for creation, but this is an intersectional topic. And I think that's the beauty of Laudato Si. So I've also put in here which other ones work with this: asylum seekers and refugees, First Nations perspectives, human dignity, solidarity. We touched on that in the section, how important community is to support each other in this. Young people and social justice, the Pope, who gave us Laudato Si and why. Be interesting to see how that continues too. Science and faith, so many times in this conversation we've talked about cosmology and all that sort of thing. It was really strongly in one of our, which I'm going to go back and link to in the notes actually, because I didn't put a link to that edition. Our relationship with God, as the creator, if we can find awe and all of a sudden appreciate what God's given us, and all of a sudden you value it more and you see the connection and how everything's connected in that web. Rights and responsibilities, values and moral decision making. I know that's very much that litter response, but maybe we're thinking empathetically. Maybe we're thinking about how we treat others and how we impact on other people's the environment that other people live in, and Catholic culture and identity. Because once we had Laudato Si, the Pope gave us permission as Catholics to be passionate about it, And so it's now part of our culture and identity. It always was, as Catholic social teaching, it always was in creationism and stewardship, but it just makes it a little bit stronger. We have these wonderful retreat guides, and you probably saw this on the in the emails in the last year or so, but Michael McVeigh's written some resources on caring for creation retreats and formation days. But if you wanted to talk about forming leaders for this in your school, why not combine it with our leadership retreat and our social justice retreat and take a little bit of each, so that we're not putting everything in a silo, we put it all together. So it's all sitting there for you, and you can borrow from that as you wish. So I will grab whatever Alice and Sue send to me. There's a little bit in the chat box, so I'll try and add that in too. To make sure that you can get hold of it. And I better stop talking because we're coming to the end of the session. And thank you so much to Alice and Sue for talking to me today. I could have talked to you for longer. I find an hour is never long enough for these sessions, but hopefully we'll get a chance to speak to you again in future about this topic and more, hopefully.